let's talk about how perspective kind of came to be. So, as I'm sure you guys can sympathize with the very earliest artists, it can be a real challenge to represent things accurately. The world around us is three-dimensional, and when we try to draw on a piece of paper or paint on a canvas, as you guys recently had that experience, it can be a real challenge to draw something 3D on a 2D or flat piece of paper or canvas. Artists have been struggling with this from the beginning of time, from the earliest cave painters to, early kind of primitive art forms and art all the way up through the medieval period. Artists have always had this struggle of how to make things look realistic when what they were drawing was on a flat piece of paper. So they had strategies, and they would do different things to kind of help make it look as realistic as they could. So here's an example of an illuminated manuscript from the 10th century. So this is from the medieval period. And they had tricks of drawing the buildings, you can see in the back, to see the front and the side. But they just look a little flat. They don't look super realistic or believable. They would kind of work and experiment and try different techniques. Here's another one. This is from about 400 or 500 years later. And it definitely looks better. But there's still something just not quite right about that table especially. You can see it starting to look like it's 3D, but there's just something off about it. Later on, here's another one. Again, it's better. We're getting that feeling of depth, but some of the angles to the buildings and the structures just don't quite look right. We can't quite maybe place what it is, but we just know it's fake. It's not super realistic. There's also kind of a feeling of flatness. Even though the buildings are starting to show depth, we get just kind of a flat feeling from the works. It wasn't until the Renaissance period, and this is really what kind of created this change in art, was that artists were now using like scientific methods to observe and to experiment and to capture what they saw around them in different ways. So they would come up with these little devices that had mirrors and reflectors in them. It was actually like an early form of photography. Even though they couldn't make the images last forever, they could project images on flat pieces of paper or glass, and then they would kind of draw what they saw. And through these observations, they were able to make really important kind of discoveries. And they kind of learned from each other, and they were able to kind of formalize all of these things into kind of rules or steps for drawing to make things look really realistic. And that's what really came to be known as perspective drawing. So we now, 500 years later, can really take advantage of everything these early Renaissance artists were trying to achieve. And we now have these really set techniques for how we can observe and then draw things to make them look believable and to make this appearance of the 3D world come to life on a flat piece of paper. So it's really a series of optical illusions that we're going to use. And you can see how if we trace all of the lines in this picture, they all kind of converge or meet up at this single dot right in the middle of our picture. This work does not have the lines on it, but it's the same idea. If we were to follow all of these lines in the kind of sidewalk of this piazza, it would converge right in this doorway. All of the lines from the building do the same thing, okay? We actually had the opportunity to see the original painting. This is in St. Peter's Basilica, this original work. So it was really cool to kind of see that up there as it being something that I teach. The Last Supper is a really famous work that uses this technique of perspective. So this is Da Vinci's masterpiece, The Last Supper. And we've all kind of seen what the Last Supper looked like. I chose this picture because it shows a person giving the picture some scale. So you can see just how high up on the wall it is and how large it is. When we look at things in a book or on a computer screen, we kind of forget how large that they actually are. So just to see the people in this are actually almost life-size, and you can kind of tell that from the little person standing down below. Okay? So the Last Supper is a work also that uses this idea of perspective. So we are going to use these same techniques that these early artists from the Renaissance were able to kind of discover and formalize. And we're going to take advantage of all of their knowledge and be able to create really accurate 3D drawings on a 2D piece of paper.